Two security guards tried to drag a black Marine out of his son's graduation. Then 6 Navy SEALs stood up, and the room went silent. They saw the uniform, they saw the skin, they saw everything. Except the 6 Navy SEALs seated in the crowd who saw him for exactly who he was. They didn't ask, they didn't warn, they just stood. And in that moment, the whole gymnasium stopped breathing. Elmridge High was dressed for celebration. Silver banners stretched over the gym doors, balloons tied to railings, and folding chairs packed shoulder to shoulder under buzzing fluorescent lights. Outside, Texas heat shimmered off windshields as parents filed in with flowers and cell phones. Children clung to graduation programs like paper shields. Somewhere near the entrance, a brass band tuned up, notes stumbling into each other like nervous freshmen. Solomon Dryden eased his Dodge Charger into a dusty lot behind the school. The car's engine clicked into silence, but he didn't step out right away. He sat still, eyes steady on the rearview mirror, as if gathering something inside himself. From the glove box, he pulled out an old photograph, creased, faded, sacred. His wife, cradling their infant son, eyes bright with exhaustion and pride. He looked at it for a long second, then slid it into the inside pocket of his Marine dress jacket. "I told you I'd be here," he whispered. When he stepped out, the uniform caught light. Deep blue wool, gold buttons gleaming. His boots were mirror-polished, not out of vanity but discipline. His bearing was unmistakable. Calm, steady, unshakable. Inside the gym, the air was thick with sweat and noise. Metal chairs screeched. Someone dropped a soda. Laughter ricocheted off the cinderblock walls. Solomon moved through it like a current through still water. Quiet, composed. A volunteer at the door scanned his ticket, barely glancing up. "Third row left, family section." "Appreciate it," Solomon replied. He walked slowly, eyes forward, ignoring the stares. A few people turned to look at the uniform. One woman leaned over and whispered. Someone else frowned, confused or curious, or both. Solomon took his seat and adjusted nothing. The chair wobbled under him, but he remained still. His gaze drifted to the sea of graduates lined up on the far end of the gym. Tyron was somewhere in the middle. Tall, broad-shouldered, just like his mother. Solomon remembered the night he was born. How he flew in from Okinawa with sand still in his boots, holding that baby like the world had finally given him something it couldn't take back. The gym swelled with music. The national anthem rose. The crowd stood in waves, hands to hearts. Solomon stayed seated. He didn't need to rise. His presence was a salute in itself. As the last note faded, movement at the edge of his vision caught his attention. 2 guards, private security, black polos, cargo pants, clipped radios. One short and wide, the other tall and twitchy. Not cops, just hired hands. They weren't looking at the stage. They were walking straight toward him. Solomon saw them coming and didn't blink. His hands rested lightly on his thighs. Calm, watchful. The short one leaned in. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to come with us." Solomon turned his head slightly. "Why?" "This section's for immediate family." Solomon reached into his jacket and unfolded the same printed ticket he had already shown. "Third row, family. Verified." The guard didn't even glance at it. "We were told it's full." "It was full when I sat down," Solomon said, steady. "Still had a seat." The tall one stepped forward. "Look, there's space in the back. Let's not make this a thing." "I drove 8 hours to see my son walk across that stage," Solomon said. "I'll be sitting right here." Around them, murmurs stirred. A few heads turned. A phone camera lifted in the bleachers. The short one straightened up. "Sir, last chance." Solomon's voice dropped. "You can ask 100 times. The answer's not changing." Then came the line. Soft, casual, practiced. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back." And just like that, it wasn't about a seat. It was about place. About history. About the unspoken rules people like him were still expected to follow. Solomon didn't move. But 6 men did. Rows behind. Black suits. No ties. Eyes alert. Jaws locked. They stood slowly. Deliberately. And suddenly, the stage wasn't the center of attention anymore. The air changed. Thickened. the way it does when people sense a line's been crossed. Garvin, the short guard, noticed. His hand adjusted the radio on his hip, murmuring something into the mic, eyes never leaving Solomon. Solomon didn't respond. He sat still, eyes fixed forward, jaw set. The conversation was over. For him, it had never truly begun. Beside him, an older woman leaned slightly his way. Pale skin, tight gray curls, a voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you let them move you." He nodded once. No words, no scene. He was here to watch his son graduate, not to become the spectacle. But the guards weren't done. Mally, the taller one, lowered his voice again. "Look, if you've got a problem, take it up with the school office. We got our orders." Solomon finally turned toward him. "You got a name, son?" Mally blinked. "It's Officer Mally." "Not officer," Solomon said calmly. "You're private security." Garvin stepped forward. "That's enough. If you don't stand up—" But he never finished. The far gym door opened with a soft click. 6 men filtered in. No uniforms, no words, just presence. They didn't come in together. They slipped in at angles, through side aisles, through back rows. Each took a separate seat. Casual, unthreatening. But anyone with sense could tell. They were watching the same thing. Their posture matched. Their eyes scanned. Their energy pulsed like coiled wire. Solomon didn't turn around. He didn't have to. He knew them. Not by name, by bond. The guards didn't notice. Not yet. Solomon's focus stayed on the stage, but something in him shifted. Not rage, something colder, sharper. A switch deep inside, built from deployments, from loss, from years learning when to act and when to wait. The guards hovered, not for duty, but to remind him who they thought held the power. They had no idea. He had faced down men with rifles, walked through sandstorms of gunfire, buried brothers. This question mark. This was noise. A student's name echoed from the microphone. Polite clapping followed. But the audience nearby wasn't watching the stage anymore. They were watching the slow burn tension unraveling just a few feet away. Mally leaned in again, quieter this time. "I'm trying to do you a favor. Don't make this ugly." Solomon's gaze flicked to him. "You don't have that kind of favor to offer." Mally hesitated, drew back, recalculating. Garvin wasn't as subtle. He didn't like the shift in momentum. His hand hovered near his radio again. 3 rows back, a man stood. No sound, no announcement. He just rose, broad frame, clean-shaven, eyes locked on the scene. He sat in the aisle without blinking. Then another man stood, opposite side. Same posture, same silence. Then a third. They didn't speak, didn't move. Solomon didn't need to look. He'd led them through mud, through silence, through fire. He knew where they stood without turning. Garvin leaned in once more, voice tight now. "You're making this into a situation." Solomon turned his head slowly. "And you're not listening." Garvin's hand twitched toward his radio again. A voice cut through the tension. Calm. Flat. Heavy with control. "Is there a reason this man's being bothered?" It came from 10 feet away. A tall figure in the center aisle. Salt and pepper beard. Fitted black coat. Gray shirt. Eyes like iron. Creed Marston. Solomon had pulled him from a wreck in Kandahar, dragging him across 200 yards of burning sand while mortars lit up the sky. Garvin looked up. "Who are you?" Creed didn't answer. Took 1 step forward. "I asked you a question." Mally raised a hand. "Sir, we've got this under control." "No," Creed said, sharper now. "You don't." From the bleachers, another man stood. Then another. 4 now. Solomon still hadn't moved, but the energy around him was shifting, like thunder gathering under the surface. On the left side of the gym, attention drifted fully away from the stage. A boy pointed. A teacher tried to redirect the crowd, waving her hands, but nobody was watching the podium anymore. Creed took another step forward. "You're embarrassing yourselves, and you're 1 breath away from making this worse." Garvin glanced at Mally, who suddenly didn't look so sure anymore. They hadn't expected resistance. They hadn't expected backup. They definitely hadn't expected him. Especially not back up like this. Creed's voice was low, deliberate. I don't care what your orders were. You don't put hands on that man. You don't tell him to move. You don't ask again. The silence that followed didn't feel fearful. It felt reverent. A quiet kind of respect, thick and swelling as more people began to realize what they were witnessing. Solomon finally looked up at Creed and gave him a nod. Small. Measured. Not gratitude. Not request. Just recognition. A language older than words. Creed's eyes softened briefly. Then he stepped back and returned to his seat, arms folded, gaze forward. But the tension in the room hadn't lifted. Not yet. Everyone watching was holding their breath, waiting to see what the guards would do next. Solomon's surroundings blurred. The stage, the banners, the crowded rows, all pulled into the background by memory. His mind yanked him 15 years back to a different kind of dust and heat. Kandahar, Afghanistan. Late afternoon. The sun didn't set gently there, it dropped like a hammer, flattening the sky and scorching the earth. Solomon, then a gunnery sergeant, had just finished briefing his unit when the blast hit. A roadside IED tore the lead Humvee into the air like a scrap of tinfoil. Smoke, screams, metal, dirt in his teeth. Then the gunfire. Rapid, precise, not panic fire. It was an ambush. Solomon didn't flinch. He moved. Found cover behind what remained of a steel door. His eyes scanned through haze and chaos. 6 men down, pinned behind the second vehicle. One of them crawling, dragging another through the dirt. Creed Marston. Just 3 months into deployment. A bullet already through his leg. Solomon ran without thinking. Through open space, under fire, sliding behind a twisted axle. Creed's face was blood-streaked. "You're bleeding," he rasped. "You noticed," Solomon muttered back, then grabbed the downed Marine beside him, Soto, and started pulling. Creed pushed weakly with his good leg. "Where's Divas?" Solomon asked. Creed pointed. "Left side, under the hood." And there he was, a young SEAL, pinned beneath the engine block, yelling, but not moving. "You keep low," Solomon ordered. "Move when I move." Creed nodded. That was the moment he understood what leadership really looked like. Solomon sprinted across open gravel again, ignoring the pain as he dropped beside Divas. "Gunny, don't," Divas gasped. "I'm good." "You're not staying here," Solomon replied. He dug one foot in and gripped the mangled hood with both hands. His ribs screamed. His shoulders locked. The steel groaned, then shifted. It lifted just enough. Divas yanked his leg free. They crawled. Fire cracked over their heads. Creed returned with Soto. Lim and Horton followed, ash-streaked, rifles up. When the firing finally stopped, there were no cheers. Just 6 breathing men and the hum of what could have been. Solomon stayed behind, watching the rear until medevac arrived. He didn't speak much after that, but none of them forgot. After that day, Solomon didn't have to ask for loyalty. Anywhere. Anytime. They would be there. Back in the gym, Creed sat motionless, watching the guards hover near Solomon like he was a problem instead of a father. He wasn't thinking about war. He was thinking about promises. One by one, others arrived. Javier Meeks, 4 rows back. Zachary Wells, along the right bleachers, silent, sharp, present. Solomon caught Meeks's eye. Just briefly. That was enough. But the guards didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. And they were about to find out. The ceremony dragged on. Names were called. Applause echoed too loudly in places, as if trying to cover something. But all eyes kept drifting back to the 3rd row on the left, where Solomon sat like stone, and 2 guards stood like they were still deciding what power looked like. Garvin glanced toward the front. A school official tried to get his attention, nervous, mouthing something. But Garvin shook his head. He wasn't done. Mally shifted beside him, gum working harder, jaw tense. "Sir," Garvin said louder, "this is your last warning." Solomon didn't flinch. To do what exactly? Garvin stepped closer, close enough that his belt brushed Solomon's knee. To stop making a scene. Solomon turned, his voice low, final. "You're the only one causing trouble. Garvin's nostrils flared, then it slipped. You think that uniform makes you better than everybody else? This is a high school, man, not your base. The hush that followed dropped like a curtain. A little girl stopped squirming. A father froze mid-zoom on his camera. Even Mally stepped back half a pace, like the words had hit harder than expected. Solomon didn't blink. He took a breath, not to calm himself, but to stay grounded, anchored. His voice was low, immovable. You need to walk away. Garvin didn't. His hand dropped to the front of his belt. Not on a weapon, but close enough to say what words didn't. That's when Creed stood. No shout, no dramatic gestures, just one deliberate step into the aisle. Steady, focused, like the moment had officially become his. The gym wasn't silent, but it felt that way. The kind of stillness that hums before impact. Creed's voice cut through it. If you touch him, you'll answer to me. Garvin turned. And who the hell are you? Creed stepped forward again. The man who's telling you this ends right now. One of the school board members leaned in, whispering sharply to the principal. An assistant principal stood and moved toward the rear, fingers already on the walkie clipped to her belt. Even the staff could feel it now. This wasn't going to disappear quietly. More SEALs rose. Quietly. No signal, no formation. It was instinct. By now, all 6 were on their feet, spread throughout the gym. Not looming, not aggressive, just undeniably present. Garvin started to look around, really look, and realized this wasn't about some stubborn father. These men didn't shift nervously. They didn't twitch or blink too often. Their calm wasn't performative. It was practiced. Creed took another step. You've got 2 choices. Walk away now, or watch this turn into something you're not ready for. Mally's voice cracked for the first time. Let's just back off, man. But Garvin hesitated. Solomon's voice came again, this time to Creed. Don't waste your breath. He made his decision the moment he stepped over the line. Creed didn't argue. His tone dropped, darker now. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Finally, Garvin stepped back. Barely. But enough. His hand drifted from his belt. His jaw clenched, skin flushed with something between anger and shame. A second later, the principal appeared at the aisle's edge. She leaned in and spoke softly to both guards. Whatever she said, it ended the standoff. Garvin and Mally turned and walked toward the exit. No eye contact, no words. They didn't win. They survived it. Solomon exhaled, long and controlled. Creed sat back down. He didn't say a word. The 6 SEALs remained on their feet. Still. Watchful. Near the stage, Tyron Drayton had watched every second. From his place in the student lineup, hands clenched at his sides, he had seen it all. He'd tried to focus, tried to stay in the ceremony, but he couldn't. He saw the guards approach his father, saw the stillness in Solomon's posture, the same stillness he'd seen years ago when he came home from school crying. After someone said something they shouldn't have. His father hadn't yelled then, either. He just sat. Like steel doesn't need to raise its voice to be strong. From his place between a girl with bright braids and a boy constantly adjusting his gown, Tyron tracked every move. He saw the tall man in the coat rise, knew instantly he wasn't just another parent. He was here for Solomon. Then more men rose. No one spoke, but Tyron could feel it. The room temperature shifted. The attention shifted. Pride burned in his chest. Not the flashy kind. The heavy kind. The kind you feel in your throat. He'd heard whispers of his father's service over the years. Nothing detailed. Solomon never bragged. But the stories lived in fragments. A scar here. A locked box labeled Kandahar in the garage. A Christmas card from someone named Creed. Now they had names. Now they had faces. Now they were here. For his father. Tyron blinked hard. He wouldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of everyone. He straightened, jaw clenched, as the line moved forward. A few names were called. Clapping returned, uneven, like someone had hit play after a long pause. But the room was changed. It wasn't about silver banners or paper diplomas anymore. It was about respect. An assistant principal tapped Tyron's shoulder, said something he didn't hear. He nodded anyway. The student beside him leaned over. That your dad? Tyron didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone had seen it. And now the entire gym understood what kind of man Solomon Drayton really was. Tyron's mind kept circling back. His classmates were laughing, adjusting caps, whispering behind cue cards, but all he saw was his father, seated, still, surrounded, but untouched. That chair had felt like more than plastic. It had felt deliberate, like someone built it with Solomon Drayton in mind. What shook Tyron most wasn't the confrontation. It was how his father never asked for help. How those men stood anyway. Warriors. Trained, disciplined men who didn't rise out of fear or pride or performance. They stood because they knew. And that made Tyron realize he'd only known shadows of his father's story. Medals in a box. A folded flag on the bookshelf. Photos that didn't speak. But today, they walked. Today, they rose. The assistant principal called another name. Then another. Tyron was 3 spots from the stage. He wiped his palms down his gown, heart pacing like a drum. The girl ahead turned, grin shaking. "You ready?" Tyron gave a small smile. "More than you know." On the other side of the gym, Solomon leaned forward. Not tense, just steady. He didn't clap for every name. He wasn't distracted. He was locked in. One more name. Then a pause. The announcer took a breath. Her voice dropped half an octave. Tyron Drayton. The name landed like a stone in still water. Silence cracked. Then applause. But it wasn't just loud. It was layered. Intentional. The kind of applause that moved in waves, not noise. Rhythm. Depth. Across the gym, 6 men clapped in unison. The SEALs, still on their feet. Each one struck their palms together with precision. Not for show. For honor. A salute without raising a hand. A code only they spoke. Tyron walked the stage slowly. Chin lifted. Steps firm. His heart didn't race from nerves. It raced with weight. The weight of being Solomon's son. He took his diploma, shook the principal's hand, turned, searched. He didn't need to look long. Solomon was there, front row, still seated, still present. He didn't wave, didn't move. He just looked his son in the eye and offered the smallest smile Tyron had ever seen. But Tyron understood it immediately. It meant everything. He nodded back, subtle and strong, then stepped down. The applause didn't fade. It evolved. Some parents stood, some clapped louder. A few wiped at their eyes, unsure why they were crying, only that something had passed through the room, something that left no one untouched. Solomon sat quietly, letting it wash over him. He didn't cry. Not his way. But inside something released. A quiet, unseen exhale from somewhere deep. The ceremony moved on, names called into the air. But every one of them followed the ripple that moment left behind. Because it wasn't about noise or confrontation. It was about presence. About truth. When the final name was read, the gym surged to its feet. Caps flew. Students screamed. Families roared. The crescendo of ceremony wrapped in streamers and cell phone flashes. Solomon stayed seated a few seconds longer, watching, listening, letting it soak into his skin. The music, the motion, the flash of red and silver sweeping past him, until his eyes found Tyron again, high-fiving a teacher, hugging someone briefly. Then Tyron paused. He turned. Just once. A look over the shoulder, straight toward the 3rd row. Solomon saw it. The question in his son's eyes. "Did you see me?" And without moving, without words, his expression answered. Every second. The gym thinned. Families poured into the parking lot in waves of color and noise. Solomon rose slowly, stretching legs that had been still too long. Creed approached from the side. "You all right?" he asked. Solomon nodded. "I've been through worse." Creed gave a dry smile. "Doesn't mean you should have had to." Another SEAL, Meeks, joined them. "We tried to stay in the background, but once that guy reached for his belt," Solomon lifted a hand gently. "You did what needed doing." They stood together for a beat. No need to drag the moment. Then Solomon said what mattered. "I want to see my boy." Outside, the Texas sun hit hard, stretching long shadows across the pavement. Students milled around in clusters, Gowns half unzipped, caps cocked sideways, phones lifted high. Tyron stood near the flagpole, phone in one hand, diploma in the other, laughing at something. Until he saw him. He stopped mid-sentence. Everything else faded. They met halfway. Tyron spoke first. "You good?" Solomon nodded. "You?" "Yeah," Tyron said, eyes dropping for just a second. "They tried to move you," Tyron said quietly, his voice tight. Solomon didn't respond right away. Tyron's jaw flexed. "I was 2 seconds from walking off that stage, Dad. I swear I was." Solomon placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder. "And that's exactly why you didn't." Tyron blinked. "What do you mean?" "Because you knew I could handle it. And you handled your moment like a man. You didn't let anyone take it from you." Tyron held that thought, letting it settle. He glanced past his father to the group of men near the gym doors. The 6 SEALs hadn't dispersed. They stood quietly in a loose cluster, heads close, not watching for thanks, just watching over him, like always. "Who were they?" Tyron asked. Solomon followed his son's gaze. "Men I bled with. Men who understand what loyalty means. And men who never forget." Tyron nodded, slower this time. "That was powerful." "It was necessary," Solomon replied. "Sometimes silence shouts louder than rage, and sometimes standing says more than any 1,000 words." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Tyron gave a crooked smile. "So, you gonna tell me some of those stories now?" Solomon chuckled, low and warm. "Some of them. You're old enough for the real parts now." They stood side by side, not just father and son, but 2 men connected by something unspoken, lived, earned. Across the lot, Creed lifted his hand. Not a wave, just a silent salute. Tyron returned the gesture without hesitation. The sun kept rising. But for Solomon and Tyron, time had shifted, slowed, deepened. One more lesson remained. They walked together toward the charger, the parking lot mostly cleared now. A few families lingered, laughing, loading trunks with flowers and balloons, but the chaos had softened. Solomon unlocked the car. The same car his wife had once driven to parent-teacher nights and long Sunday drives. Tyron paused at the door. His fingers ran over a scratch near the handle. "She would have screamed loudest today," he said, quiet. Solomon smiled. "And made us retake every photo until your smile looked perfect." They climbed in. The cabin was warm from the sun, quiet, sealed off from the noise outside. Tyron turned, watching his father. "I gotta ask, why didn't you say anything to those guards? You just sat there." Solomon tapped the steering wheel once, then turned to him. "Because I don't need to stand to prove who I am, and I don't need to raise my voice to be heard." Tyron stared forward, jaw clenched. "You know how many times I've had to choose between letting things slide or blowing up? That moment today?" Solomon said. "That wasn't new. Not for me. But how we respond. That defines us. They disrespected you." Tyron shot back. "In front of everyone." "Yes," Solomon said. "And everyone saw it. But they also saw the truth. They saw 6 men who could have been anywhere else stand." He reached into his coat, pulling out the old photo, his wife holding a baby Tyran. "I carried this through Kandahar, through losing your mom, and I carried it here. Not because it gives me strength, but because it reminds me what's worth protecting." Tyran's voice lowered. "You always knew they had your back." Solomon didn't hesitate. "I didn't need to know. I had faith. Real men don't vanish when it's uncomfortable. They show up. And they stand." There was a pause. Then Tyran said what mattered most. "I want to be like that. Like you." "You already are," Solomon said. "You walked that stage with dignity. You didn't let anger steal your moment. You stayed grounded." Outside, the last of the SEALs were getting into their vehicles. Creed glanced toward the charger one final time. Solomon gave a single nod. No words, just acknowledgement, silent and permanent. Tyron leaned back in the seat. "So, what now?" Solomon turned the key. The engine rumbled alive. "Now," he said, "we drive home. You pick dinner." Tyron grinned. "Waffle House." Solomon smiled. "Of course." They pulled out of the lot. The school faded behind them. But the memory of what happened inside that gym would linger in every heart that had witnessed it. For Tyron, it marked more than a diploma. It marked the day he understood. Manhood wasn't about noise. It was about how you hold yourself when no one's watching. Because some people shout to be seen. Others sit in silence and are never forgotten.